We're now recording.
Here we go again. It seems like only 1 or 2 days ago that we were recording our last show, and here we are again a month later, recording yet another edition of the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour. Today's guest is somebody I've been looking forward to talking to formally during a formal interview situation now for a very, very long time. Susan contacted me Susan Leybourne contacted me probably around about 5 or 6 years ago on my Anthony Peake forum site. And she placed a very, very intriguing posting, which I'm hoping that Susan will describe initially to us first. But it was such a fantastic posting that Susan and I got in contact. And through Susan, I've spoken twice now at a location in Essex, which is a place where spiritualists and mediums get together to actually be trained. Now, you may find this quite surprising, but mediums can be trained, and Susan is somebody who trains mediums in how to bring out the skills involved. I'm hoping we'll be touching on a little bit about that. But the other thing is that Susan is also a fascinatingly eclectic lady who seems to have traveled the whole world, seems to know so much about so many things. She's now embarking upon her PhD. Clearly really, really knows her subject. And what I respect so much about Susan is that she is a medium and she works within mediumship, but she's incredibly rational and down to earth. She takes the approach of science. Rather like myself, she's intrigued by these experiences and these phenomena, but she wants to understand them. So it's not just a matter of going on about them and describing all the wonderful things she can do. Susan is far more interested in exactly what is taking place in these things, which is exactly why there is a great deal of mutual respect between Susan and I. Without further ado, so the guest today, as I say, is Susan Leybourne. Just Susan, to start off with, just tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, who is Susan Leybourne?
Hello everyone. Yes, I'm Susan Leybourne, and I have a huge history, and I started off having experiences of, let's say, the spirit world and altered states of consciousness when I was very, very small. And it made me really interested in all of this phenomena, and after saying to my parents, what's going on, and trying to ask questions, and they knew nothing, living on a council estate in South Leeds. They didn't know anything about anything esoteric or metaphysical. And I was taken to the library as a 5-year-old to try and find something stabilising, such as Janet and John or Bao the Elephant or something. But instead, I kind of tootled out of the kiddie section and went along to the occult section and the section 133 with all the metaphysical stuff. And I came across this massive book about the history of astrology. And I remember it was blue and black on the cover, with lots of interesting symbols. I said, I want this one. And my mum said, you can't have that, it's too old for you, you won't understand it. And I had a little bit of a tantrum, and then the lady in the library, she said, well, we're going to close soon, choose your books, everyone. So I came away clutching this tome of ancient sort of astrological history, not about how to do charts, but who did what, when, how, and when, and the findings that they discovered. And I was little, I was 5, and out of every 10 words, I could make out maybe 3 or 4. But I thought, I'm not going to be beaten. I'm not going to let my mum say you can't understand anything, or it's too old for you, or, so I kept on, and we kept having to renew the book and keep renewing the book. And after about 3 months, I got to the end of it. And then my mum must have thought, right, that'll be the end of that silliness, and we'll have Bao the Elephant next. But no, I went back and I picked out another big book on the history of the European witch trials and ancient paganism and cunningcraft in Europe and all the history that went there. And gradually, throughout my childhood, I just read everything in the library that was about everything metaphysical, about the esoteric, about mysticism, philosophy, about anthropology, and the mind, how the mind works. And I was really, really fascinated. So when I got to the age of about 9, after having all of these experiences since really as young as I can remember, I decided when I was 9 that when I left school I wanted to be a clairvoyant and a medium and to help people. So I set about learning all of the things that I might need to know. So I started learning about runes and tarot and astrology and numerology, you name it, palmistry, all of the things that might make me interesting as a kind of workaday psychic. And when I was 15, I had my first experience where I was in a bookshop in Leeds, and a Pakistani young man was asking for a certain book, and they didn't have it, but I knew they had it in a different shop further up the road. So I told him where this other book was, and the girl didn't need to send for it for him. And he asked me, well, do you do all of this? And I said, said, yeah, I do, really excitedly, and he said, well, would you do my sitting, do a reading for me? And I said, yes. So we made an appointment time. And then a week later, now I had forgotten that I'd made this appointment and thought it won't come. It was just going to be, oh, yes, thank you very much, and we won't meet. But a week later, he was standing outside that bookshop as I walked by. And I thought, completely forgot that we'd made this arrangement. So we went to a cafe nearby, the Aroma Cafe in Leeds, where I sat and I did my first ever reading that someone paid me for. And I was 15, and I thought, well, that will be the end of that. Then about 2 weeks later, I had a phone call from this chap, and he said, my brother wants a reading. And then after that, his cousin, and then, everyone in his street pretty much wanted readings. So I ended up organising, all of the kind of psychic stuff of picking brides for Muslim weddings and things, and saying, oh, this one's a really good one, and this one's not so good, and, doing all of that. So my first year, all of my clients were Asians. And then after about a year, my first white lady said to me, well, I bet you're really popular down at the Spiritualist Church, aren't you? And I didn't know there was one. I was shocked and quite, intrigued that there might be a Spiritualist Church in Leeds. So the lady told me where it was, and I went along the following Sunday, and they had a lady on the platform doing all of that, can I come to you, dear, and I've got this and I've got that. And she gave me a message, and she said that she saw lights all around me, and of course everyone turned around to see who this interloper was, who hadn't been before, this young kid sitting there. And at the end, they said, we're going to have an open circle. I thought, well, I don't know what this is, but, I'm staying for it, whatever it is, I'm staying for it. So we all sat around in this circle, and one by one, all of the old dears, because there were quite elderly ladies and gentlemen as well, they would get up and they'd say, I've got a man here, I've got a woman here, I've got your mother, I've got, and make contacts and give people messages. I thought, well, I can do that. I know how to do that. So after 3 or 4 people had gone, I thought, right, I'll get up. So I did that. I started getting up in open circles. And then after about six weeks of doing that, the lady who run the church, a lovely old lady, Mrs. Naylor, she said to me, I've got an opening for April, like this, would you be interested in doing the platform? Well, I thought, yeah, okay, why not? And I got through it, and at the end, she goes, I'm putting your name forward. So that was my first intro into the world of mediums and mediumship. But I realised that a lot of what mediums believe, it's very much, kind of mythology. There's a lot of mythology about mediumship and the spirit world and how it all happens. And it's all very, kind of not really understood by people who work within that field. So I made it my business to try and find out all the mechanics of mediumship and what the process is of what mediums are doing when they are working in altered states of consciousness, when they are working psychically, when they're giving messages, when they are connecting to someone who is, for want of a better word, dead, but still maintaining consciousness. So I started to look into all of this, and I started to realise more in recent years, over the last maybe 10 or 12 years, that mediumship works in the same way that physics works. When a communicating entity, a spirit person, such as someone's mum or dad or granny, when they connect with a medium, they're acting in exactly the same way that particles react when they're being identified. For if you imagine that the atmosphere around us is surrounded by intelligent beings, but they're in a wave form, in the same way that particles are in that wave form, light is in that wave form. And then when we start to focus in on the energy around us, we build an empty state for the being to kind of manifest itself into, him, her, itself. But until that point where the medium starts to focus on that point, either here or here, it's usually very close to the head, around the collar, but imagine you've got a huge collar on and it's spreading out the energy to kind of make your aura, your energy field as big as possible, extending that power. Then you're creating an empty state that an intelligent being can make itself known to the medium in. And so when you start to focus on that state, of course, it collapses the wave function, and then you can then start to interact with that being, with that spirit person, with that loved one, in the same way as talking to your friend, your neighbour that's in the physical body. And I'm very much about evidence, so this is something that we need to address in mediumship, because very often people just say, oh, I've got a man's energy and it feels like, oh, he loves you, etc. And it's not very detailed. What I like to look at and how I teach people is to say, okay, well, I want to say I've got Father here, and I know that Father worked on the railways. He wants to talk about his time in Nigeria, that kind of thing. So we're getting more relevant information that someone can say, yes, exactly, that's my dad. Rather than all of this, oh, I can see a pot of gold over your head and I can see you're going to come into money. That's all really, very, very low skilled mediumship. So most people who are on this sort of pathway of spiritual growth, they have to go through these illuminations and awakenings. But very often, in the Eastern traditions, for example, they would look at these powers, these siddhis, as they refer to them, as hindrances on their way to illumination. So people in the West, we get stuck on all the kind of, oh, wow, look what I got, and I got this and I heard that, and wasn't that exciting? And they don't go beyond the experience, which is taking you to a higher state. So in the groups that I teach, one of the main practices that I have people doing is a kind of version of an expansion into emptiness and dissolving into all that is, dissolving into the power that is around you, so that you and the world that you're trying to interact with become more in sync with each other. So looking at that synchronization between yourself and all of the other worlds, I mean, we imagine that we're sitting here, but there are, kind of police signals whizzing through us, radio signals whizzing through us, TV, but as well as that, all of the other realms, which would also include elemental spirits, nature spirits, the angelic realms, the realms of the astral plane and so forth. And all of these various realms intersect each other. And very often people would look at the emotions of the spirit person, and they say, oh, I can feel this is a very warm person, I can feel this is a loving person, and this is the astral aspect that you are perceiving. When you see this, oh, I've got this lady, and she tells me that she used to, go to the Dragon pub or something, or the Dog and Gun or something, that is part of the mental information of the person, the facts and figures. So I started to look into this, that at the point of death, when people have this life review, it seemed quite strong to me that what is actually happening is that there is a separation of the astral self and the mental self from that mesh that has been within the etheric energy, within the energy field. The etheric is our higher vibration of our physical self. And the other aspects, as we go further and further out through these many layers and levels of the spiritual body, we also encounter this astral self and also this mental body and also this causal plane and so on into the divine realms. So looking at these aspects of ourselves, when we have this life review, most people that have it, they always report that they watched it like a film. Like watching a movie with no emotion and no attachment to it. which suggests that the emotional astral part and the facts and figures mental part are actually parting. And often people have these discussions about reincarnation and, if you're a medium, who you're talking to, if people have gone on, kind of thing. But a lot of people, they don't realise that we are more than just our physical unit. We're more than just the bones and skin and everything that we are. We are all these many, many layers that spread out into infinity. So that when we die, it is very possible that you can come back as another person, but your divine spark will go off onto the realms and levels that it's meant to be at. Now, as part of my recent research, I looked at the origins of the afterlife, where people have experiences of the upper world, where people talk about, going through a tunnel and seeing the light and doing all of this sort of ascension and going into these higher realms and going into a garden, meeting relatives, all of these things and the origin of it, because I was very interested about how that entered Western thought. So a lot of my research over the last maybe several years really, but more in a more kind of structured way. I did my master's dissertation on the origins of the afterlife in ancient Greece between the 6th and 4th centuries BCE. So I started to look at where did this come from. And many scholars, they said, it's come from shamanic experiences, that, Scythians, they were mystics and they were shamanic practitioners and so forth, and they experienced heightened altered states. Well, in my research of the time that we're looking at, the 6th and 5th century BCE, we don't have the Scythians having that sort of belief in altered states and ascending to meet divine beings, or after death going into these altered states and seeing, this heavenly experience. It seems to have come in much later. Through the Scythian interaction with Persians during the Achaemenid Empire, during the expansion of the empire with Darius and later Xerxes. The army of Darius I, the backbone of that army were mostly Scythians and other people, other races as well, but there were very few actual Persians that fought in the Persian wars. So, they would have been exposed to all sorts of mythology and beliefs that came from the teachings of Zoroaster. And in the origins of the belief in the afterlife, either up or down, whether we're thinking about hell where people are punished or heaven where people are rewarded, neither of those two realities were laid out before Zoroaster. So we have to look at that as possibly that each person creates their own afterlife. Each person creates their own existence in the world to come. Rather as a construct, rather than something that is pre-existing in another dimension, that we put our intent into that world, into that reality, and we create another reality that is favourable to us according to our ideas and beliefs. And sometimes people who have not been particularly religious, not been particularly philosophical or any of those things, they've had these ideas where they've experienced something quite profound. But other cultures have this idea of merging into this universal emptiness or this universal void, which is just as powerful and just as to me, just as interesting as being in, this garden with, beautiful people and, music and the music of the spheres and all this kind of thing. The same thing with this idea of reincarnation. People imagine it came from India, but we can't really see this idea of reincarnation and transmigration earlier than Pythagoras. And it seems to have been kind of invented by Pythagoras, only by him, and then spread about afterwards in the 6th century BCE. So we see these ideas of the afterlife and what happens to people in the great beyond. And we also see these Persian traditions spreading into Judaism, spreading into Egyptian religion, spreading into Greek religion, which then entered Christianity, and the idea of heaven was born. So, that's what I've been looking at, in my recent studies, but looking at it from a very kind of detached way, rather than me trying to prove something in a kind of, banging my drum kind of here I am kind of thing to preach a philosophy. I'm just, taking note that this is something that people have changed their views about the nature of the soul over centuries. The origins of these ideas of the soul, if you look at the writings in the Homeric tradition, in the Iliad and Odyssey, we have definitely this place, Hades, where everyone goes to, whether you're good or bad or indifferent, everyone goes to Hades. And, and in the Odyssey, it talks about these wraiths in rags, in book 11 of the Odyssey, Odysseus, he meets his mother and he meets, the Tiresias, the blind seer. And so looking at these traditions, necromantic traditions that were, kind of around in ancient Greece, it talked about many, many souls, not just the one soul that we think about nowadays. So this idea of a soul in the chest and the soul in the head and the soul in your body parts, a soul which is to do with your courage. You're on a battlefield, and the thing that makes you kind of lunge at the enemy, or, volunteer at a karaoke party, that is a different part of your soul than the one that's going to ascend. And that was also believed to be an aspect of your soul. And they were thought to kind of sit inside each other within the centre of the chest. So very much like the Indian idea in the Upanishads, which talks about, the soul is the size of the thumb and sits in the centre of the chest. In these ancient Greek traditions, going back to the Homeric tradition, we have many, many, many souls that over time were thought to dissolve and disintegrate and fall away and be lost on the wind. So we have these ideas in many of the traditions where the philosophy, particularly Pythagorean philosophy and the Orphic traditions, influenced Plato and his ideas about the soul and one's experience afterlife, what happens after you're gone. And in the Phaedo, for example, we have Socrates in his prison cell, and he's visited by two Pythagorean students, Simmias and Chebes, who come to ask him, is it true that when we die, our souls will be scattered on the wind and will no longer exist? And Socrates says to both of them, don't fear that you'll be lost and you'll be scattered on the wind and you'll become nothing. Which was part of some of the ideas which were current at the time, that you may become nothing when you die. But other ideas were, you may ascend to some upper world afterlife. Now, at the same time, in ancient Greece, especially with influences from the Near East and also from Asia Minor and from Sicily and southern Italy, Sicily and southern Italy were Pythagorean centres, but also the Orphic traditions were kind of moving forward through different cultures, through different places. Orphism was thought to have come through Thrace, which is modern-day Bulgaria, with their ecstatic traditions. But in those days, it's been suggested by modern scholars that anything which was regarded as Orphic is what we would call New Age. Anything which was outside of the views of the party line, so to speak. And the party line of Hades and the underworld afterlife was kept going by a lot of these these tragedies, Euripides, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Aristophanes, who was a comedy writer. But all of these ideas were kind of propagated by these writers. In 432 BCE, we see the first instance of it written down anywhere. It was on a war memorial for the Athenian dead, and it talked about that their body, that the earth has received their bodies, and their soul has been received into the ether. And the ether was the origins of heaven. That was the Greek version of heaven. So when we look at this idea of the soul ascending, that was immediately picked up by Euripides, who wrote it into some of his plays about this upper existence. And then Plato, in his Plato work in the Timaeus, he referred to this tripartite soul, where the two lower essences disintegrate, and the intellectual soul, that is what ascends, and that is what is maintained in the afterlife. And then later still, when we look at Aristotle in his work on the soul, he was talking about the daemon. The daimones, filling the whole of reality, filling the air around us. And he seemed, kind of bemused that people weren't aware of these beings in the air all around them. And I know, Anthony, that your ideas of the daemon are very strong in your research and your writings. But over the course of many centuries, the idea of what the daemon is, or the daimon, what that was, altered and shifted. So that when you go into a place, you may get a feeling of sacredness, or you may get a feeling of there's been an argument here, or I get a feeling that someone's been having sex here, or I can get a feeling that this has been used for sacred activities, or so everything which has got an atmosphere of an emotion was regarded as the daemon of that particular place, which may be later regarded as the sort of genealogi, the spirit of the places that are there. So Socrates had his daemon, who told him everything what not to do, and never told him what to do at all. He never said don't. He never said do something. He always said don't do something. And there's a very interesting piece in the Phaedrus, which again is Plato's work, where Socrates was apparently the sort of character that he really liked to hear the philosophical works of other philosophers, just to see what the competition were doing, So he asked his chum, Phaedrus, can you get hold of this piece of work by this competitor, So he turns up with this piece of work. He goes, I'll read it to you. And the piece is all about whether it is more relevant to have lots and lots of sex, or to have one person that you are very much in love with. And is love beneficial, or is sex more appropriate? What is the benefit? So Phaedrus kind of nicks this bit of philosophy from this guy. And Socrates, of course, he pulls it to pieces and said it's rubbish, and Phaedrus says, this is fantastic, it ticks all of the boxes, it explains everything in an ABC format, what can you mean? So he challenges him, and he says to Socrates, let's go somewhere and let's see if you can come up with something better, just off the cuff. Let's just sit somewhere and see. Now, Socrates walks for a long time until he finds somewhere where the daemon is right, and he can feel the energy of the place pulsating with the power of the nymphs. And he kind of gets himself into his little state. He goes into a deep trance, and he starts to speak with his head covered. So he's in a darkened space. He starts to talk, and he's doing all of this fantastic stuff. Now, in the middle of it, he's able to say, hey, he pulls his thing back and goes, that was going really well, and I thought I was fantastic when I just said that. Wasn't that astounding? So he was able to take note of his own words in the trance state. Now, many mediums nowadays, they say, oh, I was aware of nothing, I didn't hear anything, I didn't feel anything. Oh, I said that, did I? Oh, really? So even going back into the time of Socrates, we can see that people talking in an altered state and having some awareness of the words that they are saying, which I find very interesting, because nowadays it's very, very unusual for people to actually be in a completely zonked black state and have no awareness of what they've said. It's next to, unknown. I've encountered it in things such as African traditional religion, where people kind of come to and have no idea about what's happened, and in things such as possession, trance in indigenous societies. But in Western spiritualism and channeling and all that kind of thing, it's much more of a light experience that Socrates explained, and the fact that he was able to talk about what he had said, know what he had said, and then comment on it as well. So I started to look at the nature of darkness in the development of mediumship and psychic development. So I realised that darkness is very, very powerful. When I was very small, I used to sit in the electric cupboard under the stairs. I was instructed by my, let's call them spirit guides, the other world, whatever, sit in the electric cupboard under the stairs and watch images form on the back of the door, which I did. And I did this every night at about 9 o'clock for many, many years. And then over the course of time, they gave me other practices and things to do. But I was taught by the spirit world how to contact the spirit world and how to understand what was going on. Because a lot of the books that I was reading as a child, they were all adult books, based on academic research. There were no how to do it books. There were no kind of, how to do things that you can get nowadays. Every line, I was hearing another voice explain to me what that really meant. So reading between the lines. And I still maintain that as a practice. Alice Bailey had a very interesting idea about ray types, the 3 major rays, and that the ray of will, the first ray, they will attain their enlightenment through running a circuit through the body, through the etheric body. So we have things such as for example, the lightning flash exercise that you get in Hermetic Kabbalah, or the middle pillar exercise that you get again in Kabbalah, or moving the chakras up the body and so forth. That is a circuit that you are activating within the body, but that will work for people who are of a ray of will and power. People who are on a love and wisdom ray, they will achieve their enlightenment through expanding their energy into ultimate emptiness, so expansion into all that is, into nature, and expanding out and letting the energy field just become bigger and bigger. But the third ray people, who they are more involved in knowledge, the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, that they will receive their empowerment through, their enlightenment through studying sacred texts and scriptures and allowing the information to build between the lines. Now, when I was, many years ago, I was in a fantastic experimental group with a very well-known writer who was very, very well respected, called Phil Hine. And we did a variety of Kabbalistic exercises, and we did this particular exercise where we're running a circuit through the body, working on the Sephirot of the Tree of Life. Now, I got bored with this exercise, after I got home, and I'd done it as was for a few days. I thought, no, stuff that. I will do the God names instead. And then after doing this 3 or 4 times over the course of several days, after a while I had this huge bang, this huge boom, like something exploded in my energy field. And that kind of moved me on from that energy to the more of the wisdom energy, where the process that I use now and teach to others is this expansion into emptiness, expansion into the cosmos, and becoming at one with that, becoming less and less dense. You're getting rid of the dense physical self and merging with the infinite. So, that is a process that I always kind of encourage people to do. But there are many, many ways that are going to be helpful. Some of the things that I'm looking into now academically, I'm looking at the connections between ascension texts in the pre-Kabbalistic material, in the Hechelot and Merkabah texts that are, roughly from about the 1st to 4th century CE. But also comparing them to the Chaldean oracles, which only exist in fragments, and also the Hermetic texts, the Hermetica, Corpus Hermeticum, and so on, where we can see many parallels of merging into this infinite, of going up through many, many levels, layers and levels, until you become one and you face God and become God. And in those texts, it talks about God being in the fire. And that the false thing that you experience is the water. As you get to the highest realm where you're about to meet God, then you will see tons and tons of water like an ocean ready to engulf you. But if you think, this is water, then you will be, you'll be done for. You are supposed to see it for its true reality, that behind that reality is the throne of God. And we see these same stories in the Chaldean oracles. We see it in the Hermetic texts, in many early texts. So what I'm about to start my research on now is to see if the Chaldean material, which is only in fragments and being preserved in little bits of ancient sources, did that continue into what we now know as Kabbalah. And move through these various early sources of Hechelot Zutarti and Hechelot Rabbatai and the Ma'asa Merkava, and all of these mystical texts that are based on the experiences of certain enlightened rabbis, and the Enoch material, for example, Enoch 3, where we see this ascent story moving up through these layers and levels while in the body. This is nothing to do with being dead or having a near-death experience, but once you have, imagine like Moses coming down from the mountain, kind of radiant because he's seen God and lived. And in a lot of these ancient sources, it talks about you cannot have this experience and not die on the spot, or not be frazzled, or not be damaged in some way mentally. And even in, some of the medieval Kabbalah, we see these instances of, for example, Isaac Luria and Abraham Abulafia and their experiences of the permutation of Hebrew letters and moving through various connections where they're opening gates to realization. This idea of opening gates comes in very strongly with the ideas that Hugh Everett III had with his many worlds interpretation of opening these gates into alternate dimensions. And I really think that when people are communicating from the spirit world or from the angelic realms or from any other reality, that they have full existence in these other worlds. Now, I had a very interesting experience when looking at the Enochian material of Dr. John Dee. And I had a revelation that 1601 he opened a portal into some other dimension where information was flowing forward and coming in from an external source, which is beyond this, outside of this universal energy, from some metaversal reality. The reality behind the reality. And I was curious about this, having received this piece of information, and I contacted someone who is a scholar of Enochia, and I asked him what he thought about this statement that I had received, that in 1601 a portal had been opened by Dee. And he said, of all the material that is there of these diaries, the whole of 1601 is missing. So that is something very interesting to me, that, and he worked through these layers and levels of these Enochian beings, these angelic beings, and some of the practices that he used can be compared to, spiritual ascent in really early texts as well. So that's what I've been doing, Anthony. I've been doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
Susan, that was simply magnificent. I am in awe of your enthusiasm, your ability to actually synthesize and make accessible very, very complex ideas, from the Orphic traditions right through to the Kabbalah, to the ideas of Zoroastrianism and everything else. We, just for everybody very good in the background, Susan and I had a chat yesterday about these things, and I was really hoping that Susan would actually focus in on these areas, because for me, the idea of, for instance, even Enochian magic and Dee and everybody else as well, and the way in which language is used, the way in which script writing is used, it actually comes back from the Enochian magic through to the Kabbalah and to the use of numbers and everything else. This is something of profound importance. And what is absolutely brilliant about what you're doing is that you're bridging, I'm trying to bridge the science to the spiritual. And what you're doing is you're doing even more, because you're linking the science to the spiritual, to the historical aspects of how the occult, the hidden occult traditions developed in Western Europe. Now, I will guarantee that Dia is bouncing up and down in the background, because Dia is very much an expert on the African traditions and the deep mystical traditions there. And I'm pretty damn sure that there will be an incredible overlap of synergy from what Dia can tell you about the traditions that she works within to the traditions you're talking about as well. So that there is this fascinating area here. Now, but on top of that, what you're doing is you're talking about very much the Gnostic tradition of the hidden. The idea that the pleroma is something that is hidden from us, that under certain circumstances we can break through into the pleroma. Also your concept of the daimonic, and the idea that an area or a place is imbued with demonic spirits and demonic attitudes, because funnily enough, this is what's going to be the subject matter of my 11th book, which I'm actually discussing with my publishers at the moment. And the idea that there is something out there that is just beyond our perceptions. Now, an example of this, and I think it was you that was responsible for this, at the Arthur Findlay College, when I did an event with you 3 years ago, and you made me stand up and try and see if I had any abilities in terms of being able to attune into things. Now, people who know me know that I'm an extreme rationalist in these things, and I'm an extreme skeptic unless I'm actually proven. And you had me stand up, and you told me what I needed to do was to just, as you said, just to expand outwards and take in somebody behind me and tune in. And I thought, oh, yeah, of course, I'm going to have to go along with this. But what actually happened was stunning, and I know you were there, and I know there were other witnesses that are Facebook friends of mine on this as well. But what happened was that I got a very distinct image of a young girl, and a young girl describing to me a kitchen. And in the kitchen, it was a peculiar layout of a kitchen, because the actual doors had been taken off the shelves of the kitchen.
That's right.
Baking and burr. And it was the most peculiar image. Now, this is not an image that you would spontaneously get coming into your head, because it was weird beyond anything. And I just gave this out to the audience and said, I have an image of a young girl, and she's telling me about a kitchen with the doors off. And a lady stood up in the audience, didn't she? And she said, I cannot believe what you just did. Because I'm here at the moment, I'm a school teacher, and I'm here at the moment because I want to be involved in the events and the week's events here at Stansted Mount Fitchett. But also, while I'm away, my kitchen is being done, and they've taken the doors off the kitchen. And I was absolutely astounded. I stood there stunned for about a minute, even trying to equate how that had happened to me. Now, that was absolute proof, if any other proof was, that what we're doing is here, we're attuning into the Akashic field, the Akashic record, the 0 point field, whatever we want to talk about, there is this kind of attuning in. And you train people powerfully, effectively to do it, but it's your knowledge base that fascinates me as well. Absolutely fascinates me. Now, what I'd like to do is to move on a little bit from there into your own experiences of getting information from elsewhere. And I'd love you, for instance, to tell the story that facilitated our contact in the lecture theatre, you know, the one with the time slip and everything else. Because this astounds me, and this is the kind of information that people will turn around and say, and rationalists will say, it's anecdote, and the plural of anecdote is not evidence. But the point of the fact is that people have these experiences all the time. They are very normal people that have extraordinary experiences. So if you could just share this one with us, and then spin out to any other experiences you've had, because I know you've travelled the world, you're an incredibly well-travelled lady. So any other experiences you've had, as well as that makes you believe that this is more than the reality we live within?
Well, I've had quite a lot of experiences where time has folded in on itself. I mean, one of my first experiences, I was working in Liberia in 1996 as a diamond diviner, believe it or not. So I was employed to go out into the jungle and without tools or anything to locate veins of diamonds of where the diamonds were travelling. And, I'd say here and small, and they would start to dig as I was walking along and taking the path. Now, on the second time I'd gone to out into the field, it would take so much time, kind of getting villagers rice and dropping people off, and because of the nature of what was going on in the country at that time, if you came outside of Monrovia, you needed official papers, which I had. I had a diplomatic passport, even though I'm not a diplomat. I somehow managed to get this passport, but I've not left my medication. I have to take medication in the evening because I thought we'll be back. So I left it in the house where I was staying, and I said, "Oh, well, I need to get back." And we've not even got to the place that I was going to work until 7 p.m. that evening, even though it set off at like 6 that morning. We were really delayed. So I said we need to go back because I can't stay in the jungle overnight, even in a little village hotel or something, because I will need to take my medication. And the guys there, they were saying, "Oh no, it'll be all right, don't you worry, and it'll be okay." I said, "No, we really must go back," and I was very insistent about it because I didn't want to kind of sort of chance fate or something by not taking the tablet I was supposed to take at that time. So in the jungle, it becomes pitch black at that, 7 o'clock. It's like a blanket. It just falls, and you cannot see, your hand in front of your face. And now we had driven from Monrovia on dirt roads to get to the jungle. So that was a 3-hour journey, and then trekked through rough bush, crossing 2 rivers and a swamp to get to the place I was going to work at. But we now had to go back in now total darkness. So Abdullah, who was our helper at the time, I had a military escort and everything. He goes to a villager's hut, and he gets a prayer mat, and he starts doing all of his Allahu Akbar thing, and he's praying, and he's doing his prayers. And they think I'm some kind of what they call a zoe there, like a witch doctor or something, because I know where the diamonds are and I can do cool stuff. So I said to the guy, "Are you happy now that Allah will help us get back to Monrovia before curfew?" Now, during that time, you had to be in your own house by 10 p.m. Otherwise, you would be arrested and taken to prison. And anything you had would be taken from you and confiscated. And Abdullah said to me, well, no, not really, I'm not. So I said, well, I will speak to the jungle spirit, who will speak to the river spirit, who will speak to the road spirit, and we'll be back to Monrovia before curfew. So it was literally impossible. We set off walking, it's pitch black, and it's no safe place, even in daylight, but somehow that entire time moving through the jungle, we set off at 7 p.m. We were back at the house in Monrovia, which is more of a 7-hour journey from where we actually were. In three and a bit hours, we were back for 10 o'clock, and the whole time of going through the jungle just folded in on itself, and like time just folded in, and no one really knew how we had done that, because it was actually impossible. So that was one of the first experiences. I really like jungle. I'm a real strong jungle person, and I really feel that affinity with the energy of the jungle and spirits, and the energy that's there. Another time, I was doing research in Borneo, and I've been told that there had been an incident where these ancestral pots, where people have their ancestral spirits are kind of venerated within these pots within the Iban tribal society. This is how they venerate their ancestors. But 2 of these big pots had broken just by magic, just gone bang, like some awful thing was about to occur to the people in this longhouse in Scran. So I was told, come on, get your stuff. This is real stuff now. It's happening. It's not a festival. It's not a ceremony. This is like real magic, So there's going to be a ceremony. There's going to be a big ritual to find out what went wrong. What needs to be done to make sure that the gods are appeased and the ancestors are happy. But because I was kind of what they call Manang, white Manang, I was taken to lots of places en route to get to this place, kind of make the lame walk and heal the sick and do all this kind of stuff. And everywhere we went, we were given oodles of this, this really strong rice liquor, which being the Manang, I got to make and not get drunk, which again, that was a miracle, because I'm such a lightweight. But we got to one place, and I saw the ceremony was supposed to start at 9 o'clock that night. And I saw all these warriors in traditional tribal dress coming out of the bush, to kind of just walking, out of the jungle, like they were going somewhere. And I actually said to the other people in the vehicle, my goodness, there's a lot of dead men on this road. I can see all of these warrior spirits who were in a formation, and it's like they're going somewhere. And then we were just told, this is the place we're going to. We went into the longhouse, and my friend who was translating for us, for the ritual, he said they're just at the point now where they're calling all of the dead warriors to come forward to assist in the ritual. And I'd actually seen them coming out of the jungle, quite solidly, but I'd also experienced real solid spirits, because after that, I went to visit an old friend that I'd looked after when I was involved in the chaplaincy at Leeds University. And this guy, he was now a lawyer in Kuala Lumpur, so I went to visit this guy. And him and his cousin, they said, well, let's go and see this crazy island. It's supposed to be cursed, but let's see what you can get. So we got to the boatyard, and it was 5 o'clock on I forget what day it was, but it was 5 p.m. and the boatman said, "My God, 3 people! I'm not going over there for 3 people and rowing like a mad person. What do you think you're playing at?" So he said, "Go over there, go and have a coffee. Sit and relax. But it's not really likely that anything is going to happen that is going to help you get to this island. I need 8 people to go." So we're sitting there, and the odd thing is that we were served by this man, and we all had kind of soft drinks, and it was a really surreal thing, you know, this sort of one-eyed man, you know, serving us as this sort of one-eyed chicken was chased by a one-eyed cat. It was like really, really surreal. And then suddenly these 5 strangers just dropped out of nowhere and were walking down the pathway towards the boatman. And they looked really confused. I found this with all these kind of solid spirits that are there to fulfill a purpose, that they always look really, you know, kind of gormless, you know, really stupid, like, what am I doing here? But the boatman came up to us and he said, oh, you know, now come, you know, people have come, you come now. So all 8 of us got on this boat. These people had money, you know, we had money, and they sat in silence on this boat trip. And we went to this island. Now, there's nothing on that island that you can kind of get lost or waylaid with. You know, the only thing that's there is the shrine of an Islamic saint and his 6 giant daughters. And that is the only thing that is there. You couldn't really get lost in shops or at a casino or do anything, you know, any crazy thing. And the man said, come back in 1 hour. Which we did because there was nothing else to do, you know. It wasn't a touristy sort of a place. These 5 other people did not come back, but there was no hotel there, no houses there. There was nothing that they could kind of get, you know, involved in and, you know, let time slip away. And we just went back, and that was it. And these people just didn't return, but they were solid. They had you know, a flesh and blood attributes, but they looked really stupid, like they had no souls. You know, so that is an interesting thing that I've experienced, which, you know, one of my Facebook friends, Adam, I mean, he was there, you know, he will tell you all about it, because we were stunned and mortified and gobsmacked, like, oh my goodness. These were like real solid spirits. And the same thing had happened. I was taken to exercise a museum in Kuching. And the museum had been closed for several months because they'd had poltergeist activity, and no one could go in. And I'd gone in, and I picked up that we had, within these jars, we had a Chinese man next to 2 Iban mamas, you know, and the two women were kind of, you know, chatting and getting on his nerves, and he was kicking off and he didn't like it. So what I'd got is that they needed to make an offering of rice and fish, and tuak, which is their rice spirit. So I described this offering to make, and anyway, a couple of days later, me and the lady who was hosting me, who was Iban Elder, were on the road to Sriaman, which is a 2nd division in Borneo, and we stop at like a noodle house for breakfast. And as we come out of the noodle house to get back into the car, there is a Chinese man who says in perfect English, "Oh, it's you again," like this. I thought, do I know that man? Is this someone I've met at the airport? And I looked at him, and I turned to my friend. I said, "Rosalind, do you know that guy?" And then as we turned to look, he was gone, and it was the Chinese spirit from eating his rice and fish in the doorway. Yeah, in the doorway. So again, these sort of drop-in entities that are, you know, spiritual beings. You know, I've had lots of experiences of things like this. I think, you know, one of the most bizarre was a case in Germany. I had a Turkish client who. He asked me to do, you know, some work with him, and I went over, and you know, because we got finished quite early, you know, and I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. He came up with all of these kind of Santa Claus requests of what he really wanted, and he said, well, I'd really like a girlfriend, but she must be an Alevite Muslim, you know, she must be really trendy, she must be really this, and, you know, and a really nice girl. And I thought, oh God, you know, will German spirits even know what an Alevite Muslim actually is, you know, what they do and what they believe? Because, you know, let's just kind of. So I'm sitting in my hotel room with a closed door, and out at the locked door, and next to my hotel room there is a fire door, a heavy metal fire door. And whenever this particular person came to my room, the fire door would bang, so I would know to get up off the bed, go and open the room door and let him in. But I'm kind of looking the other way, and I'm, sort of sitting holding on to his photograph, and I'm tuning into the spirit world, and I'm saying, please give me a sign, give me some sort of sign that I can help him, because he seems to have come up with all these sort of Santa Claus ideas that I'm going to, kind of manifest some woman for him, and anyway, I didn't hear the door go, but suddenly I was aware of someone standing behind me. And there was a dark-skinned girl, olive-skinned, wearing a black leather jacket and jeans, and she's pointing at the other bed in my room. Wo ist mein Freund? Wo ist mein Freund? Ich bin hier für mein Freund. Wo ist er? Saying in really confused. Where's my friend? I'm looking for my friend. Looking really stupid, like he's not here. Where is my friend? And I said, perhaps it's the wrong room, So, and she went out. And the hotel was quite a small hotel, so I looked outside to see, let's see her come out, let's see where she goes. Now, I didn't hear her knock on any other doors or go in any other room, and that was the only way in or out. But she never came out. I came home, and 2 weeks later, that man rang me when I lived in Leeds. He rang me up and he goes, you won't believe I've met this fantastic girl, and she's this. And I thought, my God, it's the woman in my room. It's the woman that came to me, as solid as you and me. So I told him that what he had to do to kind of sort of secure it all and make sure it went well, which he was a bit too much of a wuss to actually do. And after 3 or 4 weeks, she just disappeared. So all of the details of her existence, he went to go and find, where she worked, and, that place didn't exist. No one knew of her in her neighbourhood. And I don't understand it, because he had a relationship with her for several weeks. So that to me is like a really crazy, story. It reminds me a little bit of those old stories of men having relationships with sea nymphs and mermaids and these sort of elemental beings that take on physical form to fulfill a purpose.
Funnily enough, I'm aware of time, and we're running out of time, but very, very quickly, my associate and Dia will know of him. He is one of the world's experts on hypnopompia and hypnagogia, a guy called Andreas Mavromatis. And Andreas very much talks about the elemental spirits and everything else that you can manifest under certain circumstances that come into existence. I also know another guest on this program we've had on the past is Dr. Art Funkhauser, who is an expert on deja vu, who's also a quantum physicist, and he has told me 2 or 3 times now, times when he has needed people who have just manifested from nowhere and sorted things out, and then he's subsequently trying to find out who they are, and they've disappeared and they never existed. Yeah. So absolutely. Very fantastic discussion. Again, I'm sure that Dia is in total agreement with this, that we must have you on again in the show. So wonderful. So very quickly, I'm aware that we're over time now. But quite quickly, if you can let people know when you can get on, when you can, how they can contact you and everything else, that will be really good.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm on Facebook. Just, look for Susan Leybourne, Clairvoyant Medium. You can also look at my website, which is www.susanleybourne.com. And that's probably the best way, because that's got my email details actually on the website, so you can contact me on there. But anybody who wants to be my pal on Facebook, very often what I do to people, once they've been on a course with me or we've met, I have lots of chats with people. So quite often I will have former students, current students want to know something, and I'm quite happy to stay up until the wee little hours kind of discussing things on in the chat box. So yeah, that's about it really. Mail at Susan Leybourne is my email, and my website is www.susanleybourne.com.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Susan. That is really brilliant.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
You. Okay.
Thank you
very much. Just a very, very quick one. The next show we will not have one in June because I'm going to be away on holiday over in Greece, probably doing my own Orphic searches. But in the show afterwards is going to be a really unique one in the sense that we've got quite a famous rock musician joining us, a guy called Charlie Farron. And I'm hoping that Charlie will also be doing a little bit of his music for us as well, so it'll be slightly different. But Charlie's a really interesting guy, some very interesting stories to tell as well. So thank you very much, Susan. Terrific show. Really, really enjoyed it. And again, as always, the lady in the background that makes this happen. Without Dia Nunes, this would not happen. And as always, my great thanks to Dia for making this happen as well. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll be speaking to you soon. And again, Susan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful show. Thank you. Bye.